Good to see you. Oh, I'm blind. I can't see. I'm blind. Oh, there I am. Float on top. Wish I had a button for that when I was in the water. Welcome. I'm sorry I'm not here. You're pressing on without me. We're looking at 11D, which is not simplifying, but dividing radicals. This part, divide radicals. Divide. Great. That is what we're up to today. In my stead, as a little warm-up, what I'd like you to do is open up in your notes to this where it says example and your turn. That's actually in your notebook. If you forgot your notebook or your little brother ate it, then just grab some scrap paper and try it in there, or in your notebook and not your workbook. So try that out, and I'll give you a hand in a second, and then we'll move on with our lives. Okay, if you're multiplying this fraction, we are using this idea that fractions are pretty easy to multiply. You just multiply everything in the numerator, everything in the denominator. You don't need common denominators, which is nice. It's actually adding and subtracting. That's the obnoxious part of fraction work, because you need a common denominator. So I'm just going to put 4 over 1 to make it look like a fraction, and multiply everything on top. 4 times 5 gives you 20, and multiply everything on bottom. 1 times 2x gives you 2x. And then we're going to simplify, right? So this becomes 10 over x. Neat. Great. Homework questions? You got any homework questions? You didn't do your homework? That's too bad. Okay, at the end of this, I want you to be able to divide algebraic fractions. Take two fractions and divide them. So, this is the main principle behind this. You can put this in your notes. 11D is correct. We're going to use 11D to divide algebraic fractions. And when you divide, the concept is that you keep this original fraction, and instead of dividing, you multiply by the second fraction flipped over. So instead of C over D, we flip it over to D over C, but A over B stays the same. That's called the reciprocal. The reciprocal is the same fraction flipped over, right? So flip it over. For example, hopefully if you take 8 times a half of 8 should be 4. And you could think about that like this, 8 over 1. You don't have to necessarily write this down, but just follow along with me. You'd multiply everything on top and everything on the bottom, so that's 8 over 2, right? And that's 4. Not a big deal. Similarly, if you take 8 divided by 2, that should be the exact same answer, 4. And so that kind of gives us a hint that these two are the same operations. We started with 8, we keep 8, but instead of dividing by that fraction, we flip the fraction over. Instead of 2 over 1, reciprocal, we make it 1 over 2. And that makes sense, right? Because 8 divided by 2 should be a half. So here we turn it into this 8, and we multiply instead of divide, and we flip this second fraction, not the first, but the second. And there you go with your 4. Now take that idea and try it with these, with the 6 and 1/3 and 2/3, right? This is going to happen the same way. Instead of calling it 6, I'm going to call it 6 over 1, so it looks like a fraction. We're going to ease our way into the fractions, and instead of dividing, I'm going to multiply, and I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 1/3. The reciprocal of 1/3 is 3 over 1. And so then we multiply everything on top and everything on the bottom. Neat. And so you should just get 18, right? Don't leave it as 18 over 1, just leave it as 18. And that kind of makes sense. This kind of means like 6 is a third of what number? It's a third of 18. Play the same game with this. 6 divided by 2/3. Let's say 6 over 1. And I don't know how to divide fractions, but I do know how to multiply by the do know how to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by 3 over 2 instead of divide by 2 over 3, because they're the same operation. Multiply everything on top in the numerator, and you multiply everything in the denominator, and then you simplify. Great, moving on, let's try it with variables. So, 2 examples. Maybe you want to pause me and try it, maybe you want to walk through it with me. But here's a 2 over a divided by this other fraction. I'm going to keep that original fraction and multiply by the reciprocal of this one, b over a, b over a. Multiply everything in the numerator, 2b, and everything in the denominator, a times a, denominator, a times a is a squared, and that simplifies into nothing, right? This is 2 times b and a times a. There's no common terms in the numerator or the denominator, so we got to leave it. We play the same game with this 4 divided by that mess. I'm going to call it 4 over 1, and instead of dividing by that fraction, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. And when we do that, you get multiply everything in the numerator, 4x over 2, and you simplify, and that simplifies to just straight up 2x. Nice. Great, okay. You try this last one on your own. Here's another example if you want to see it. Pause me until you get this your turn done. Okay, the 4 I'm going to treat as 4 over 1, and instead of dividing, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is the second fraction flipped over. You multiply everything in the numerator, 8b, and you multiply everything in the denominator, and then you simplify. And this simplifies to 8b over a. There's nothing similar, there's no common terms in the numerator and denominator, so you got to leave it and walk away quietly. All right, that's it. There's exercises in 11D. It might go kind of quick. What I'd like you to do, if you're done with those, is either go back and finish up anything in your packet that you haven't gotten to, or you could go forward into graphing equations. We'll get our calculators and I'll show you how to do that graphically with a calculator, but you can also just graph it by hand. So you can go forward into the next section. We're going to do our quiz 4 next time. So you could study up for that by working some problems. If you'd like, you can look at in the text for extra problems, because sometimes we go A, B, C, D, and we skip a few. There's a link to the text in there, and you can find extra problems in the text. Or alternately, you could review your old quizzes for next time I see you, we'll have a little time to take a quiz retake, I believe, and so you can study up from that. Cool. Make me proud, and I will see you later.